Thank you very much, Ian. As Ian said, now I'm professor of economics at Paris Dauphine University, and when I was invited by Jérôme and the organizer, I was still at EDF, and so I don't know exactly if I was invited because I do models in EDF, and it was good to have someone from EDF. Because yes, it's a great financer of stochastic models and this initiative, Finance for Energy Market Research Initiative. And then I decided to move to academia, to switch from research management to research. Okay? And so I'm going to present something, it's a joint work with Mike Lutzkowski, who is assistant professor at Santa Barbara, at the University of California at Santa Barbara. Alors, il va faire ça tout le temps, là. Okay, and his PhD student, Liangshan Li. Okay, so in fact, the talk will be divided in two parts, two very different parts. Alors, first, I will talk about investment in electricity in general, because I think there are many people here in this room who are PhD students, so you know many things about stochastic calculus, but electricity generation, and it's an old problem, it's worth studying, and in fact, one main theme of the finance for research, the finance for energy market is devoted to problems of valuation of investment in electricity generation. And then I will present this joint work, which is a small model, and I will conclude and drive some perspectives for you. Okay, so investment in electricity generation, does it work? Okay, ça marche. Okay, so if you want to tackle difficult problems of the industry, it's the right place. So even when it was a regulated monopoly, even when before 1996, the deregulation, the European Union directive on the deregulation of electricity market, to tackle the problem of investment in electricity generation was very difficult. Alors, why was it was difficult? Because in fact you had the choice, you had to make a choice between a large number of possible technologies. And those technologies, they were facing very different cost structure, very different construction delays, and very different operational constraints. So you have a set where you have to pick up your decision variables in a very large set. And there are also many risk factors. The future is unknown, the electricity demand is unknown, but the fuel prices are unknown. Even during monopoly, in the 50s, the price of coal was known. It was decided by the state. So the price of coal, the price of oil, everything was decided by the state. So there was less uncertainty on that, but you still had uncertainty on demand. And you have outages, meaning that all these power plants, they fall apart. They are machines, so they break down. And for instance, when you want to invest in hydro, you have inflows uncertainty. And once you have done your investment, you keep your asset for 40 years. And in fact, for the dams, they are there for centuries. When a dam is built, it is part of the country. And it's very capital-intensive industry, very capital-intensive. So the last numbers I put is the last EPR that EDF wants to build in the UK. They want to build 2 nuclear power plants of 1,650 megawatt, and the estimated cost is 18 billion GBP, just before building. They just started it now, and there has been a little increase. Okay, so those kind of babies, it's the cost you have to pay. But then, once it's there, you have 50 years. Okay. But it is also the case for coal-fired plants. Coal-fired plant, 1 gigawatt of supercritical coal-fired power plant is $1 billion. So those kind of investments, they are very heavy. And it was a complex problem, and then deregulation made it worse. It depends for mathematical point of view, it's better. We're going to see that. But for people, it's making worse because now incomes depend on the wholesale electricity prices. Before, on regulated monopolies, you have fixed income. And in fact, if you had some problems, you made the consumer pay. Now it's no longer possible. So the revenues of utilities, electric utilities, they depend on a thing which is wholesale electricity prices. It's a market. So the price is determined by the offer and the demand. And when you have something like this, you have something which is bankruptcy. It's possible. For instance, it has important financial risk. And now, if you look at the European situation, you have around 500 billions of stranded assets, meaning that people made some investment in Europe during the boom of electricity prices and during the boom of commodities in 2008, a large increase of commodity prices. The oil price of $150 per barrel, so the electricity price was skyrocketing, so everybody was making a lot of money. So they built a lot of power plants, and then the price collapsed. They introduced renewable energy, but renewable energy are not the main factor for the reduction of prices. There are studies about that. It's one factor, but it's not the main factor. The main factor is the reduction of coal prices and oil prices. And so utilities lost billions of euros, and there are many power plants who are to be shut down because they are not worth it financially anymore. Okay, so you may lose a lot of money. It's the business. And also, people can eat your cake because now there is competition on generation. If you want to build any power plant on any technology, some other guy can do it. There is no more monopoly on generation. And there is one also, and we're going to see that there is limited space on the stack curve, meaning that we're going to explain that. We're going to explain that. It's like a market, your consumption, and in fact, it's a cake. And you can divide the cake in different parts, base load, mid load, and peak power plant, and peak load. And in fact, all these three kind of electricity consumption, they have a certain size. We're going to see that. And also there is regulation uncertainty. Since 1996, every 2 years, there has been a new directive or a new law which had a direct impact on all electric utilities in Europe. Every 2 years, since 1996. So it has a direct impact on your profit. Okay, so I have to follow it là. So here is a list, for instance, of all the technologies that you may know, the gas-fired plant, the coal, the nuclear, and each technology, in fact, they are derived in many steps. If you're in the business, so all these, you know what these, the pressured waters, and for the EPR is Gen 3+, electric diesel. There are still some diesel, but nobody builds any more diesel. And wind, the game changer. Wind farms, which are either onshore or offshore. Onshore, you build it on the ground. Offshore, you build it outside. And photovoltaic. And there are two kinds of photovoltaic. The one that you put on your roof, and the one you build on fields. And the one you build on fields, the cost now is around 50 euro per megawatt hour, which is very, very low. Okay, and there are those minor technologies. So you have to make a choice between all those technologies. And there is, for example, a list of costs, and this is the price that you have to pay to buy your power plant. These costs are in US dollar by kilowatt. A kilowatt is what you have at home. At home, you have a counter, and your counter is measured in kilowatt. So, for instance, for a nuclear power plant, 1,000. 1,000 for 1 kilowatt. If you want 1 gigawatt, you multiply this by 1 million, and this is how you get $1 billion. Okay, but look. Wind, it's the same cost. It's the same cost. But, okay, there are time to build, but there is something which is there, which is the efficiency or the load factor. And the load factor for wind, this number should not be there, is between 15 and 35%. What does it mean? It means that for wind and for photovoltaic, you have production if you have wind or if you have sun. So when you put 1 megawatt of wind, you don't get a base load, 1 megawatt every hour. You need to wait for the wind. And this is the ratio. So you're going to get between 15 and 35% of energy during the year. Okay? These are operation and time to build. Alors these are time to build. There are some outliers. For instance, nuclear, 5 to 9 years. For the EPR, which is in Flamanville, we are already in 10 years. Okay? But the Chinese are building their own in less than 7 years. Okay, so these are all the costs, and these are the constraints. Constraints, you have many, those kinds, they are power plants, so they are machines, and so machines, they cannot respond to they have some inertia, okay? So, for instance, you have those kind of costs, startup costs, minimum production, minimum, ST is minimum stopping time. When you stop a power plant, for instance, a coal-fired plant, you have to stop it to let it get cold, and not just like a switch. You should not start it, stop it, it's very bad. Okay, and so you have all those constraints, and for instance, for a coal-fired plant, look at the minimum stopping time, it's between 4 and 8 hours, and the minimum running time is 8 hours. So once you start a coal-fired plant, you have to keep it there. Okay, and for nuclear, minimum stopping time is 24 hours, and minimum running time is 3 days. So it's very, very difficult to manage, they are very, very less flexible. They're not very less flexible. And here is the stack curve. This is an important feature, the stack curve, because the competitiveness of each technology depends on its merit order. On a short-term basis, the only thing that matters is the fuel cost, the price of the fuel cost. How much does it cost to run now? The thing has been built, and you guys are there, and they are getting paid, and this is past cost. You don't care about it. Now what you're asking yourself is, how much does it cost me to run for the next hour? And to run for the next hour, the only thing that you need to pay is the fuel cost. And this is how you sort the power plants. Let's start by the end, by the extreme. Those guys here, oil and oil plants, are very inefficient power plants, and they have they burn oil and they burn gas, okay? And they are going to be used a very little amount of time during the year, again, say, because they are at the end of the curve. Imagine that the red line is the demand, and at short term, for the next hour, electricity demand is completely inelastic. So there are some, but people, they are going to consume, and the only way to satisfy demand is to start all those power plants. So those guys are going to be cold, they're going to run only in case of extreme demand. So the demand has to be very high, so in winter, during and maybe in the future with the climate change, in summer with the climatization. Okay? In Marseille, for instance, peak demand, poof, now. Okay, and so you have the gas, the coal, and all power plants are sorted out like this, and then you have nuclear, and you have must run. Those who are there, the base load, because I'm talking a lot about that, those who are there, they are going to run during the year a lot of hours during the year. The year is a certain number, 8,700 and blah, blah, hours. These guys, they are going to run more than 5,000 hours per year. But the coal-fired plants, they do it also. And so they provide electricity on a base load, meaning base load, because in fact they produce constantly. They constantly produce because constantly there is consumption of electricity in the society. They never get completely out, okay? And so those two guys, they are in competition, and I'll talk a little about that, but those two guys, they are naturally in competition for providing base load electricity. Okay, and in the world, they are in competition, those two guys. And if you look at the number of the year, even if there is a great trend of renewable energies, investment on that, there is still investment in coal-fired plants in the world. And yes, because it is the first technology used in the world to produce demand. Europe is not, I would say, representative of the world. Okay, so how to solve this big problem? It's a project that you're going to have, 3 of you, I don't know. Okay, so how are you going to solve this problem? Alors, d'abord, it's been a time that I work on those kind of problems, but I have to confess that there is a large gap between what electric utilities do in practice to solve those kind of problems and what we like to do. Okay, and things that you might find in mathematical, economic, and financial literature. There is a little, yes. It's not exactly, okay. So, main decision tool used by utilities, net present value. Okay, they have a feuille Excel spreadsheet. Okay, they put investment cost, the business plan. They take one scenario of prices for the next 40 years. Okay, and they actualize that with a discount factor, and click, and they claim, oof, we should do the investment or should not do the investment. Okay, it's very, very, very far from optimal stopping time of reduction. I'm going to talk about that. So they say, but you still need something which is the prices for the next 40 years. Okay, you need the scenario of prices. And how do you get the scenario of prices? They rely on generation expansion planning models. What are those kind of guys? It's generally it's a deterministic model where you have a forecast of demand. You enter all these data. You enter all these data in the model, the cost, and then you solve a large optimization problem, deterministic, where you say at that time you should build this amount of power plant of this technology to minimize the cost to satisfy demand. Blam. This is it. And to get the price, you will use the marginal cost of electricity at each time period that you are interested in, the hour, the week. Okay. So it's those kind of problems. So, okay. So there are legions. Alors, it was during the monopoly. So you could have the hope that the regulation would trigger something very new, a new trend, and say, okay, we have to now to take into account the fact, for instance, that there is competition. There is competition, and competition between utilities, it's only an oligopoly. In Europe, there are big 5 or big 6 players, and so it's not going to be. No. Same methodology is still applied in the regulated market. So in every, it was the case, and there are reasons for that, and there are sound reasons for that. There are sound reasons. So in EDF, they still use those kind of technology, but the colleagues I met in E.ON, in RW, they have the same methodology. The direction of strategy, they have the same methodology. Okay. Alors this is just I kept this because I think that this summer school is about numerics. Huh? It's about numerics and optimization and control. So it's a citation of Pierre Massé. Pierre Massé was a former executive director of EDF in the 50s, and he's the one who built the economic calculus methods at EDF in the 50s and in the 60s. But he was also a mathematician. He was also an economist. And already at that time, he had a fiber, he had a tendency for numerics. And I will translate it. In 1944, there was a controversy about should we build or not hydraulic power plants. Okay. And he was led to tackle this difficulty, to formulate a linear program. It was in 1944, a linear program with 4 constraints and 4 variables to take the decision. Okay? And to minimize the sum of the costs of production discounted. Okay. So it was 1944, 4 variables, 4 constraints. He used his paper. Okay. And then in 1945, at a colloque in Los Angeles, at a workshop like this in Los Angeles, he met Danzig. And Danzig explained to him that we could come from this small linear program to programs with 69 unknowns and 57 constraints using electronic machines, computers, so 1947. Okay, and so he launched, in fact, in EDF in Clamart, the first investment in electronic computers, and in this time, they were able to solve a problem with 255 unknowns and 255 constraints in 1961. So there's still hope. So the investment, and now we are tackling millions. Okay. So they were already using numerics for tackling their investment decision. But from the point of view of methodology, it is always the same. So just like to say, so now there is competition, but there is also one thing, they should have tackled the idea that there was a paper by McDonald and Siegel in 1996 who claimed that in fact the the investment timing, the fact that people who have an investment decision to take, they have the right to invest whenever they want, should be valued. And so it led a bridge between optimal stopping time and investment decision. And so normally, this method should have gone into the industry and to change the methodology, but it did not. It did not. It did not change anything. Alors I made a short survey of a large literature about optimal stopping time and real option, and there are hundreds of papers on that. And recently, there have been more papers on investment decision, optimal stopping time, and game. But already in 1993, Smets, in his PhD thesis, he addressed the question of a game between two investors who wanted to invest a large manufacturer in a foreign country, but they know, each investor, they know that if one manufacturer is built, there is no room for the other one. Okay, you imagine, I don't know, Samsung who is trying to build a manufacturer for microprocessors, and I don't know, another competitor who is planning to do the same. And they know that if the first one builds his power plant, his factory, then he's going to have all the market and the other one will have nothing. But the income depends on the price of the microprocessor or the output, and this price is random. So everybody wants to wait until to maximize his benefit, but with the fear of being preempted by his competitor. So it was 1993. And what we are going to do in our model, we're going to do something like this. Okay, so I go on. Alors, are real options used in the industry? No. Unfortunately, they are not very used. Or why are they not very used? There are surveys about that, about why decision makers, they don't really rely on those kind of things. First, what we do here, generally what we do is small models with a little number of state variables and random factors to try to get analytical results and to make some comparative static. While in the industry, they need to have all these constraints to take their decision. They need to have a representation of all the available options and all the constraints to say, okay, what's going to happen? So this is one opposite. But there is still hope, because I would have given up. But those models, those models meaning real option models with stochastic control and a small number of state variables, can still provide insights for specific take questions, meaning that you have to address and to be sure and to address and to fix a setting where you say, okay, for this setting, I can address the problem because I can reduce the problem. It's not the big problem where I'm going to decide which power plant I'm going to build in which time period, but I want to address a specific problem, but this problem should have a large impact to drive the attention of the decision maker. And so this is what we are going to present. So, we are going to present a small model, design a small model. Now, it's simple, but it is not trivial, aiming to capture competition between two industries. What I want to capture is the competition between those two guys that I mentioned, which is nuclear and coal. I want to capture irreversibility. Once they have done their shot, there is no turning back. If they shot and things get bad, for them, the probability they get bankrupt is very heavy, very high. The capital-intensive investment, it's large in time there, and limited market size. There is no room for both of us. And also, I want to capture the asymmetric effect of carbon price. I'm going to see that because they are there. Okay, and so this is the project that we launched with Mike. And also, we wanted to work on games and dynamics, and because it was fancy. Okay, so at that time we were very happy, and so we're going to have analytical solutions and blah blah blah. Okay, but okay. Alors, the problem. What is the problem? The problem is the following. The value of a nuclear power plant is very depending on the carbon price. If you look at the estimated cost of technologies provided by the International Energy Agency, they provide reference costs just to help decision makers to assess the relative cost of each technology. And in their assessment, there is the hypothesis of the carbon price. And if you move the carbon price to $30 per ton, then nuclear power plant outweigh completely coal-fired plant to provide baseload energy. So, okay. Okay, so interesting. But now the carbon price is €5 per ton. Okay, it's there. It went from this and okay, so it's there. Bon, okay, it is there. Okay, so nuclear industry faced the following dilemma. Alors, why do I ask myself this question? Because it was not given to me by EDF. Huh? You just was thinking about it. Okay, because they could wait for a rise for carbon price. They could wait. Okay. And when the carbon price is going to be very high, I'm going to make my nuclear power plant, because then it's going to have a value. Okay? But maybe if I wait, the old guys, they are going to take my cake. And the in-coal technology take all the space for baseload generation. Or they can preempt the space right now. You can say, okay, I'm going to put my nuclear power plants, and then maybe in the future, the carbon price will rise, and I'll be there. And if I'm there, the coal won't enter into the market. Okay, so this is typical preemption problem in industry. Alors, I was actually, because in fact you know that, okay, so the nuclear industry is facing big challenges, and not only EDF and Areva. In fact, the main players, there are also main players in the nuclear industry in Asia, which is China. They have the biggest nuclear power plant industry which is in China, but also the Korean, okay, and the Russians also. So there is also between them, there is a competition. Okay, and they are all moving like this, very to sell nothing. So okay, so I say, well, what do they do? This pushy like this, because maybe there is a problem. Okay, and in this setting, I don't talk about renewable energy, which could provide also a baseload energy. Okay, but it is another problem, and you can change also the thing in the model. Okay, so the model that we are going to use to tackle this question. Now, there are two firms, and they can increase their generation QI, by paying a lump sum. So they put the money on the table, and bing, they increase their capacity. Okay? Both firms know how much capacity is available in baseload generation. So you have to figure out that they make their computation and they make their forecast, and they say, okay, for baseload generation in Europe, there is room for, I don't know, 50 gigawatt of baseload generation. And if you go beyond that, all the capacity, extra capacity that it won't run. There won't be room for it. Okay? We denote by Ni the number of expansion options. Alors, we are going to count backward, because since we know how much space there is, we're going to count how many options each technology has left. So each guy they know, there are going to be two guys. N1, T is the number of expansion options for the first player, and N1 and 2 is for the second player. Okay? And what are the instantaneous profit? The instantaneous profit rates, they are going to be, it is like this. This is player 1. The N1 and N2 is the number of options left, N1 for player 1, N2 for player 2. X is going to be an exogenous factor, it's going to be the carbon price. It's going to be the only random factor. Okay? N1, N2 is going to be the electricity price collected by the power plant. And since it's going to be optimal switching, and it only depends, I don't have even to specify an inverse demand function. I just give me the numbers P, N1, N2, and I can make the computation. These are fixed costs, but you can take it out. And this part is important because this is the asymmetric part. You have to figure out that X is the carbon price. So if the carbon price rises, there is a positive number there, so the profit of the first company rises. But if it rises, for the second company, the R2, ρ2 is also positive, so this one is going to decrease. So if the carbon price increases, first player gets money, and the second one loses money. and the money they get is proportional to their capacity. Okay? And we're going to take the price is going to be absolutely deterministic. There is no randomness in there. I don't care about that. The only thing that I care about is the effect of carbon price, which is going to be random. On the long run, you can say, but this guy is also going to be random, but we cannot, with two random factors, it's more difficult. And in the long run, you can say, okay, it's going to be this value, on average, it's going to be this value. Okay. And the carbon price is supposed to follow an Einstein-Uhlenbeck process. Alors, this is the idea. The idea is the following. So we know that, in fact, the carbon price highly depends on political institution and political will. And so we are going to use mu, which is going to be the strength, I'll call this guy, the coefficient mu, which is going to be the strength of the mean reverting process. We're going to use it to measure the political will. Okay? The higher the mu, the higher it means that if you start with a price which is very low compared to this limit price theta, then if there's a large political will, you're going to reach very quickly theta. Okay? If there is no will, no comment, because yes, time are difficult. If there is no will to increase the cover, the price is going to move like this, and you're going to wait years and years and years before you get theta. Okay, so in the numbers, you have to figure out that theta is going to be 30 euro per ton, $30 per ton, and mu is going to vary. And we want to say what's going to happen. So now, what is the objective of the guys? Yes, theta. Okay. I'm going to start directly by that. And then I will ask you a question. Okay, so both guys, when the carbon price starts at X, and I'm the guy I, and everybody, we are in the state N1 and 2 as options, they are going to explain. So we want to maximize our profit, intertemporal profit, from 0 to infinity. This is my profit rate, this is the discount factor, and each time I invest, I decide to invest, there is a time there, and when there's a problem, it should be, but each time I invest, I pay the investment cost K, okay? So, and each time I invest, investment cost, I increase my capacity. So I increase my income, and I decrease the income of the other guy, okay? Okay, and alpha 1 and alpha 2 are going to be sequences of random times. Okay, and it's a game. It's really a game because I'm player 1, this one I'm going to, but player 2 is also going to make his own decision, is going to make his own investment, and it's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt me through the inverse demand function, through the price P, which is going to decrease. Okay, now the question, is it necessary, or is this all necessary? Meaning that this is the model, and what I'm asking is there a way to assess the effect of political will on the optimal strategy of those two industries? So first, if there are any economists in the room, they would claim, why do you do such a complex model with optimal stopping time when with a rule of the sum, so what would be the intuition of the result? There are some intuitions that should be very, so the more the political will, the more the mu, what we expect, the more the mu, the higher the value of the power plants, of the nuclear power plants, and the sooner they're going to make their investment. Okay, so that's and so in the opposite, the lower the mu, what will happen if mu is small? Will the coal-fired plant invest first, the first technology invest first, because in fact, they know they don't have to fear because mu is low, so they're going to invest first and make a lot of profit before the price reaches theta, okay? Or the other guy, knowing that, is going to make the investment first to deter them from entering into the market. So what would be the intuition? What would you vote for? just to see if there is interest in developing a model like this and with a lot of computations. Huh? A lot of computations. So I guess my own guess was that nuclear power plants should preempt, whatever. I'm going to say that. Because if they don't preempt, if they don't enter into the market, they are dead. Okay, so no more profit in the future. So my intuition, I don't know yours, huh, but my intuition that even for a low level of mu, there would be some preemption and nuclear power plants would enter into the market to preempt them. We're going to see that if it is true. Okay, so now, so we are going to define a Nash equilibrium. So a Nash equilibrium, so okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So if you suppose that you have two sequences of random times, alpha 1 star, alpha 2 star, it's going to be a Nash equilibrium, it's just like this. Alpha star is the optimum. If one guy deviates, beta is any other random time sequences, he cannot do better. Okay? So it's written with random times. Random times are not very easy to manipulate. And in this case, how do we are going to solve this? First, we are going to reduce the problem to something which is going to be more explicit and more, well, it's going to be more simple to read. You can make some manipulations, and you can transform the optimal control problem that each guy has to solve into this problem, where this term, there is absolutely no control. It is the expected payoff from 0 to infinity when you are at this stage. So this is not control, this is purely an expectation, and you can give it to me, you can compute it if you know exactly Pn. So this is deterministic, you can compute that. Okay, you transform this, and you got something which is going to be like this. If you fix the decision, the optimal random time of the second player, the first player has to solve this problem starting at x, is going to find just one stopping time, starting at, with this payoff. If tau is lower than, is before the random time t, I'm going to receive this. And if it is after, I'm going to receive another. Okay, so just transformation of that. Alors, it is important because this one, if I act before this guy, I get this money, and if I act after this guy, I get this money. And look at this, I get this money, I have one option less left, he has the same, and if I wait, the guy has one option less, and I have the same. Okay, so it's consistent. Okay, and so this problem, you can abstract it, and you can write it in this form. You can write it, I am the guy, 1, I have to decide tau, but I'm facing someone who is going to decide a random time tau r. Okay? And if I act before tau r, I get this payoff, which is going to be called the first mover payoff. And if I wait a little, if I act after him, I got this payoff, which is the second mover payoff. Okay, so tac, 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 oui, on a fait ça. First mover, second mover. Alors now, we are going to get rid of stopping times, of those guys, because all the literature on the capacity expansion and they are all based on the fact that you can compute the things because you assume that, or not to say some proof, but you assume that the optimal strategy are of threshold type. What does this mean? It means, in this case, that in fact, the optimal strategy is always to wait that the underlying process, X, here, the carbon price, is going to reach a certain level. And once it reaches a certain level, boom, I invest. Alors here, the effect of X, this is why you can, difficult, because the effect of X is asymmetric. So for the first player it tends to wait for the price to reach a high level, because for him, high prices means a lot of money. Okay? And for the other guy, low prices means a lot of money. So the first guy will wait for high level threshold. And for the other guy, he's going to wait for low level threshold. Okay? And so we are going to assume that all I would say for all sets of options N1 and 2, the best response is going to be always in a threshold type. Alors, what does it mean? It means, assume blah, 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 okay, it's there. For the player 1, if you give me the optimal strategy of the second player is going to be S2, the optimal response for the first is going to be the first time xt is higher than a certain function that I have to compute. I will have to compute this function, S1 of N1, which depends on the S2. I have to compute this guy. And for the second guy, it's going to be the opposite. And what's going to be equilibrium policies? Equilibrium policies will be crossing points of the best response curve. So this is normal. So you will have one curve, S1, N1, N2 of S2. You drive this curve. My best response if you play S2. The best response of the other one if I play S1. And the Nash equilibrium will be the crossing of these two curves. Just like any standard Nash equilibrium with best response. OK. And so you have to compute this. And best response function, we compute them recursively with boundary stages. We know when N2 equals 0 or N1 equals 0, you have no more options. And so it's not no more an optimal control problem. It's just a single agent optimization problem. OK? And when you have 0, 0, it's just an expectation. OK? OK, voilà. Alors ça, c'est pas mal. Alors, bad things can happen. This is a problem with... it's better to use continuous control and things like, because here with impulse control and optimal switching, bad things can happen. First, bad things can happen. First, you may not have crossing. You may not have equilibrium, may not exist. Best response curve may not cross. They may not cross. Alors, there is one thing. If you look, just because I'm going to explain this better, but I think I can explain here with my hands. When you look at this problem, there is something bad which can happen. I am the guy who's to play Tau. And I know that this guy is going to act when the process X is going to reach a certain value. Okay? And if H is at this point, I know it's a point, it's going to be, you call it S, whatever. At this point, imagine that H is higher than L. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, just like when you're earning money, you have a flow of money, and you know that at one moment it's going to stop. But the moment it's going to stop, it's the moment X is going to reach S, you want to wait the last second. Still, you're grabbing money, and so you want to keep it. So in this case, it's very difficult to define a stopping time. In these situations, this problem leads to the fact that in some parts, there's not going to be threshold type equilibrium. We're not able to define like this. But we are going to be, therefore, these are going to summarize the things very, very quickly. There is a part. You remember what I told you? I told you that the first guy wants high-level prices to invest for the carbon price, and the other one wants a small one. But there are situations where, in fact, those two levels may be inverted. And in this situation, there's going to be preemption, meaning that for certain value of parameters you're going to see, these two thresholds are going to be inverted, and people are going to act immediately. So in this situation, when we find that, people are going to act immediately and then to invest immediately. And this is what we are going to call an equilibrium with preemption equilibrium. So we're going to have two kinds of equilibrium. This is bad. This is fine. The first guy, which is the sympathetic kind, is the threshold type equilibrium, and the one which is not very sympathetic is the other one, which is the preemptive equilibrium. Okay. Okay, alors, no, pas the back. So in fact, we can have these three kinds of situations. First situation, there is an equilibrium. The two cross, this is a good situation. There is only one, and is threshold type equilibrium. But you can have a threshold type and a preemptive, and you need to select which one is going to be. Or you can have no threshold type equilibrium and only a preemptive equilibrium. Okay, so, alors, it's important because in life, things happen. Because you enter into the market with a certain situation, you compute all the things, and one player can decide, no, now I'm going to put my coal-fired plant or my nuclear power plant immediately. Okay, so now back to our problem. Back to our, so I imagine that we give this to the PhD student, he computes everything. Alors, just because, yes. Alors, in the beginning, we were hoping to have analytical formulas for S1 and S2, for the function there, for those two guys. Okay, even I would say for the case where n1 and n2 would be equal to 2, and no, it's not possible. We get algebraic systems for S1 and S2, and there is no way, even for the simplest function that we design for the payoff, we are not able. So we have to solve these algebraic equations numerically. Okay, bon, c'est pas mal. Okay, so back to our problem. So now I am going to put information on the model, more precise. So first, to have a nice problem, you need to have things which are counterwise. So first, investment in nuclear, which is true, is much more expensive than in coal. Okay, so the investments for K2 is very small compared to K1. First we're going to consider an initial state with only one option to invest per firm. So we're going to consider the first situation, and this one was being treated also. No? I have an option, you have an option, we both invest. And we're going to denote P1 and P2. Alors this is an abbreviation for levelized cost of electricity of both technology. What does it mean? P1 and P2, P1 for technology 1, for nuclear, is the constant price required to have a net present value which is 0. Meaning that if you give me this price for the next 40 years, okay, I reimburse my investment, but I make no profit. Just the net present value is going to be 0. Okay? So for instance, P1 for the EPR in the UK is 92 GBP, and it guarantees them a return of 12%. Okay, donc c'est good money. Good money. Okay, P1, P2, both, they also for both technologies. And the prices P, N1, and P, they are fixed in such a way that the following address. P11 is going to be the max of the two. P11 is the max, meaning that we start with a high-level price. So we make money. Both of them, we make money. But if we both invest, it's the mean. So one of us is not going to make any money. Okay? It's going to be the minimum. And P10 are such that the investment is worth conditional on a high or low enough value of carbon. So in the mid, if I invest, and for instance, if this one means the nuclear technology did not invest, but the coal invest. And so the price that is left is just enough to say, okay, but if the carbon price rises, maybe now I can make some money. Okay? So it gives you something like this. Alors, okay. 10%, the discount factor always. Nuclear expansion cost. There is a mistake. It's per kilowatt. Because if it was per megawatt, it would be very cheap. Okay, very less. Okay, revenue rate, we start at 24. When we switch, 22, and at the end, 10. So when we reach this stage, there is no more money to be done. Okay? Puff, puff, puff. Cost sensitivity is 0.5 for the most of them. The long run carbon price, 30 euros. And we are going to tackle a political will between 0.1 and 0.25. And I guess with 0.25, we reach the long trend value in less than 10 years. And we start at 5. So it's very, okay, it's now. So the 18 billion question. So we don't see much, but what do we see there? Alors, here it is a graphic, two graphics. This is mu, the political will, and we have plotted here. This is the carbon price, X, and we plotted the investment threshold of both players. In red, it is the coal-fired plant, and in a certain color that you can see, which is black, it is the other guy. And in the screen of my computer, I see it very. And so this is S1 star, 1, 1, and S1, 2. Okay. Okay, and in this graphic, what you're going to see is the probability that the coal-fired plant invests first. Okay? So what do you see? We see many things that are very interesting because now we can check our intuition. We can check our intuition, okay? So my intuition was the guy is going to preempt, there is only one option, totally wrong. With this kind of values, which are quite, they are not completely stupid, those values, bon, okay. They are low. The price of electricity is around 35 euros, but look at that on the long run. Here the stock is 5. This is a coal-fired plant. You have to figure out that the price of carbon is going to move like this. And so, first thing first, coal-fired plant, I'm going to invest first at 5. Thank you to invest first. Higher political will, thank you to invest first. And the threshold for the coal-fired plant is decreasing with the political will. So, the more the political will, the sooner, in fact, they want to invest. Can you see that? But look, and they are very sensitive. The coal technology is very sensitive to the political will. While, for the nuclear power plant, it's not sensitive. In fact, for them, what happens is that the value here is basically, look at that, here it is 25 and here it is 30, and look at the carbon price is 30. In fact, they are waiting for the price to reach something which is around the price of carbon price. So it's very high. And for them, because of their cost, in fact, they have to wait, and they won't preempt in this case. And so the first conclusion that I was like this, the carbon price is less an opportunity for the nuclear power plants than a threat for coal-fired plants. For them, it is a real threat. If the political will is strong, then they know they're going to exit. And so look at this, the probability that coal-fired plant invest first with respect to the trick. For low political will, it's basically 1, they invest first. And for high political will, it is 0. Okay? So it is interesting because it was unexpected. Okay? Okay, so now this is the first case. So now we complexify a little the stuff because we did that for N1 and 2. At the beginning, we would have to solve it only for 1, 1, and then they discovered that they can make it for 2, 2, and 3, 3, and 1. Okay. So now we're going to tackle multi-stage. So we suppose that, in fact, the two industries, they can invest, but not only in one stage like this. They put all their money on the table, and then they're done. They could put it progressively, and we use 2. And then don't worry, I won't make 3, 3, 4, 4 until the dinner. Okay? So, yes. No, don't worry.
How do you define the political will? How do you...
Tune. Yeah. I do tune. I read the paper. So, political will by this time, very bad. Very bad political will there. But Mr. Macron has come back. Political will there. But only for France. So I don't know if it has any impact, an international impact. But yes, you can exactly tackle this if we apply. I'll give you an example. Is there going to be a carbon tax in Europe? If there's a carbon tax, political will is very strong. But if there is no carbon tax, and if the discussion and the bargaining takes years, you are there. And in fact, you can, if you can do it the other way. To answer to your question, I can do it the other way. If I say it's going to take 10 years of negotiation to get a carbon tax available in all Europe, I get a mu, because it's just time to get to 30. Okay, so it's a concrete way to calibrate the mu. Okay? But now we don't know how much time it's going to take. Okay. So now, steel investment in nuclear is more expensive than coal, but now there is still space for 2 units. But I'm going to divide the units. The price will decline to 23 if 1 investment is done, to 22 if 2 investments are done. And more investment makes the price not worth investing. So the thing is the following. There are 4 options in the market. I can build, each player can build 2. So the only situation where it's going to be money to live is either the first guy builds 2 nuclear plants, the second guy builds 2 coal-fired plants, or each of us, we build 1 of each. Okay? And electricity prices are fixed in such a way. Non, c'est copier-coller ça. Pas bien. OK, and PE, ça, OK. Ça c'est pareil. Ah non, c'est pareil. OK, ça c'est pareil. Ça c'est pareil. It is the same. OK, and now the values, much more lower and same value. OK. OK, oh no, they changed, they divided for numerical reasons. Ah, no, now it's right. Now it's right. OK. And so we have something like this. Alors, so now there are more pictures. Alors, first, here, it is the thresholds. They are the thresholds. Alors, which threshold? This is still the political will. This is still varying. And here, this is the threshold for the one guy. And look, for the nuclear, it has decreased. It went from 30 to 25, so it decreased. But regarding political will, it is still very less sensitive. And for coal-fired plant, there are 2 thresholds. The threshold for 2.2 and the threshold for 1.2. This guy is the first threshold, meaning that you have to touch this guy before touching this guy. Okay? And what you start at 5, so you're going to wait a little time, engrange, make money, touch this, and then you're going to invest in the second one. So, and so difficult, this part difficult. Okay, and what is interesting is also this one. So here we plot the probability. Alors, the probability of state, meaning that on the long run, you're going to end up with 2 nuclear power plants and 0 coal-fired power plants, or 1 of each, or 2 coal-fired plants, depending on the political will. And I explain just the dashed line after. You see, for the coal-fired plant, to start with, if there is no political will, probability that you get is very, very, no political will, you will get 2 coal-fired plants. And this one, 1, there is one step which is increasing, and suddenly it's going to drop. So there is still possibility that you get, for low political will, one of each. And there is one thing which is interesting. This is this dashed line. This dashed line is interesting because it is the probability that 2 nuclear power plants are built if a small nuclear plant is built at time 0 preemptively. What does it mean? It means, so it's another kind of the equilibrium that I talked about. So this is the first example of an equilibrium where one guy is putting a nuclear power plant, even if there is low political will, but then, with this, you're going to end up, so the probability that you end up with 2 nuclear power plants is getting higher, even for low level of political will. So what does it mean? It means if you are in this situation, if you can decompose your investment in nuclear power plant, then you can make first one step, because you increase the probability that to get all the market afterward. Okay, and this is a situation that would not be, I would say, completely intuitive. That in fact, the fact that you decompose your investment helps you to get more market share in the baseload generation. So I don't know if it is an explanation for the urge of the nuclear industry to take part in the international market of electricity generation in baseload, but this is one assert. You have to be first to preempt the place, and then you're going to see what happens next. Okay, so just a conclusion and some perspective. Alors normally, so it's possible to analyze the interaction. I hope that we did this. The industries with a compact model. The interest of those kind of models that you don't have thousands of parameters. You just have a little number of parameters, and you can assess what's going to happen regarding the variation of these small parameters. And here, what we just did is just to assess the comparative static regarding only one parameter, which is the political will of the economy. Okay. Alors, models result fit intuition, but there are some results which were counterintuitive, not completely counterintuitive, but not completely expected, meaning that you cannot imagine that those results would occur. So it provides more insight. And okay, the last thing, it's because it's not necessarily because it's a numerical summer school, in a summer school numerics, but there's a difficulty, which is tremendous, in fact. It's tremendous. It's very difficult. It's very difficult because we started, for economical papers, it's very important to have comparative static and to study those variations with respect to some parameters. And if you rely on numerics, then it's more difficult to present the results. But here, we are only able to solve, it's quasi-analytical. We have the equations for the thresholds. They are nonlinear algebraic equations. And then we are resolved to solve it numerically. In fact, I guess, and we constrain the model. So in the beginning, we constrained a lot the model. In this representation, we only had one random factor, the price was deterministic, and so on and so forth, because we wanted to have something which was tractable. But in the end, we find that even if we do that, we still have to rely on numerical methods to solve, to have the investment threshold. So my guess is, okay, maybe you could do directly some numerics on optimal switching games, or impulse games, or in dynamic games like this, directly numerics, and so you can relieve some constraints that we put in the model in the beginning. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Could you explain what a carbon tax will get you once you already have, if you already have an emission market?
Yes. I'm like you. It's always beginning to start with Renateg, I'm like you, first. I would prefer not to have a carbon tax and to have an emission market that works. Okay? And what we are now as a situation, they renounced to making the carbon emission market work. And so this is why they want a carbon tax. So I totally agree. So you're going to end up with two instruments, one carbon tax and one emission market.
I mean, you know, tax, you can tax whatever you want, carbon or anything else. What do you know,
Yes?
why would you call that a carbon tax?
Ah.
It's to solve another problem.
Ah. You mean you would tax transportation, for instance? Diesel. You can. Huh? Nuclear waste. Not so many carbon there, but you can tax. You can tax whatever you want. Okay. And you can enter also in the carbon UTS, you can enter many other industrial sectors. You can make they wanted to make the airplanes and it was a failure. Carbon tax is something that once it's in there, okay, in the UK there is a carbon floor. They put a carbon floor for the price of carbon. So I guess this is one reason I studied this problem. Because you see clearly that this value, they want a value which is going to be constant. They don't want to end up, when I mean they, it is not only the nuclear industry, you have to figure out that ENGIE is pro a carbon value. He made a public statement saying that they want a public value, they want a carbon value. And so, yes, there is this carbon emission UTS framework that should work, and it does not. It's at €5 per ton since many now, I can't remember how many years, and they design new features of this market, just look at that. They design new market of that, now it is there. Now it's a pity, it's a really pity. Il est où le carbone? No, it is there. Yes, so since 20, I can't read. Yes. Since 2012. 5 years. 5 years, and they cannot correct this. So carbon tax?
Other questions? Okay, so if not, let's thank René again.